So let's start with today with a little bit of questions. But first, of course, now I'm hoping that you all read the PDF I put on from last week's class. There was a problem that we had in the filming. I think I've got it figured out now. I had myself on Spotlight, and what I needed to do is I needed to put the client on Spotlight, and so I had it switched. Though that was a really potent session, and it also showed that sometimes we can get out of our tool set really, really quickly, because I had to go into using an indicator work fairly quickly to assess what was happening. Now, some of us may not have the skill set of self-indicator. And so when that happens, we have to start looking at, is that a necessary tool? And if it is a necessary tool, why would we not be able to use our own self-testing capacity? And I think that's one of the things that I would like to talk about today. But before that, I'd like to give you guys an opportunity, to ask your questions. This is the 4th session, and so hopefully you guys have been thinking about what we've been doing in this process, so that you may have some questions about what directions you would like to see this last bit of information that you guys get, what direction that comes in for you. Hey, Alice, welcome. Hey, Alexis, welcome.
Can I ask a question, Joseph?
Please.
So when you started with self-testing, what did you do to improve your self-testing? Have you got some tips for us to get better in it?
Yeah. The first thing is to recognize that we're our own client first in any kind of therapeutic process, because it's our own, hey John, welcome. It's our own coping strategies, our worldviews. These are the things that get in the way. And if we're not working on ourselves, we're not going to be noticing when those things show up. The other thing to do is to start looking at practicing self-testing in a store. Like, for example, going down the supplement aisle. Do I need on this row? Do I need on this row? Do I need on this row? Oh, this row, okay. Is it this section, this section, this section? And you start to find out, and then you look at, okay, what came up? Oh, B12. Okay, well, my energy's been a little bit low. Perhaps that's accurate. Another thing that you can do is you can use self-testing with books. And you can pick a book on a bookshelf and the page number. And so, like, if you have 3 shelves, be like, is it on this shelf? Is it on this shelf? It is on this shelf. Okay, it's on this bottom shelf. Is it in this third, this third, this third? And you start to narrow it down. And then it would be like, oh, is it page 1 through 10, 10 through 20, 20 through 30? Oh, 20 through 30. Okay, is it 20, 21, 22, 23, 24? Oh, 24. Page 24. Open up to page 24. What gets your attention? And it's just a way of just honing into your own capacity. Because here's the thing. We're infinitely capable. It's our own filters that we've put on ourselves and that other people put onto us because of the layers of being in society and culture and parents and expectations and colleagues and all these things start layering on our concept of self. And that stuff gets in the way. And so when we start to become our own client first, we're peeling away those concepts so that we can get to that true essence, so that we can get to, you know, it's like there's so much duality in the world. It's not so much as what's accurate, what's not accurate. It's what's relevant. You know, it becomes, language is a very tricky thing. It's a very tricky thing because language itself is not accurate. But we're doing our best to point in a specific direction.
Okay. And you are also very, yeah, but one other question about this is that you are very experienced in meditation. Is this also good for your self-testing qualities? Because you can be better in testing without intention, maybe? Or have you seen benefit of meditation in it?
Well, I think that there certainly is, and that's really about, are our thoughts influencing the results? Are we setting up an expectation? Do I want to prove something? Right? And so that comes to that place of, I like to think of it as innocent curiosity, wonderment. I wonder what. You know, and so when I'm looking at someone's presentation and I get a hit of a direction to go in, I'm exploring that with wonderment and not with an expectation of, oh, I'm looking for X, Y, Z. And so we have to be open in some way. And the thing is the X, Y, Z comes into play because the way that we learn is we learn by tools and skills. And this becomes something very different because we have to put all that to the side so that we can operate from this peripheral vision, this right hemisphere, so that we can arrive at an understanding, and then we can go over to the left hemisphere or our foveal vision and pick up a tool and bring it back and use that tool while we're in our right hemisphere. And that in itself is hard for people because most of us are one hemisphere or the other. And so there's actual games that we can play to do this. For example, if you need to strengthen your left hemisphere, you can do things like crossword puzzles and Sudoku and memory games and these kinds of cognitive task games. If you need to strengthen your right hemisphere, you can do things like painting, listening to poetry. There's a game where it requires you going from foveal to peripheral vision, in which you look at something and you have to look at it with soft eyes and look behind it, and then something else comes through in that picture. I forgot what that's called, but it's like there's a hidden image, right? Those hidden image kinds of games, that's all right hemisphere that does that. And so I think this becomes, that whole part of to know thyself and to be doing, I see Sue said something, subliminal. Yes. There's subliminal messages. And so I think that we all have different work. And so what my work is, and the way that I've come to my own understanding, is a different path than your path. and recognize that's importance. And also, there's going to be some similarities. We're all going to have some similarities in some ways, and people are going to help us with get a direction, you know, and looking for those mentors along the way, you know, those teachers along the way that says, oh, look at it from this lens. What happens if you change this filter? How does it look different now? What do you sense? What do you feel? How does that affect your thoughts? You know, the 3 lenses.
Okay, thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, Nick.
Joseph.
Yes. Hi, Rhonda. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning. So an issue I've had with muscle testing for many years has been that I tend to switch midstream what my indicator is, and I can do it multiple times in a session. I don't know why that happens. I just know that people who have worked with me and also me working with me, that's a constant issue.
It could be part of the way of your brain function, meaning that you're switching hemispheres and you're not aware of it, but your muscle testing is switching with it. Like, for example, I've had people that have had TBI, and they can't cognitively process because it switches them. And so as soon as they go into a thought process, it switches them. They have to stay in a feeling process. And so I would be looking at that right hemisphere, left hemisphere switching. For some of my mentees that are here, we've done that kind of work where we're looking at that so that we have that capacity to go from hemisphere to hemisphere and when we process.
Rhonda, when you say your indicator switches, you mean sometimes you get a yes, sometimes you get a no? Is that what you're talking about?
No. So we could start with a session and say, what is yes, what is no? And so let's just say strong is yes and weak is no. And you could ask me 2 or 3 questions, and then suddenly the strong indicator becomes the weak indicator. And that's what I mean by switching. So what was my yes becomes no.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I meant.
Yeah, so
We're
Rhonda,
saying it 2 different ways.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd like to clarify something here, Rhonda. Is that you being the practitioner or being the receiver?
Both.
Both.
It's happening both. Okay.
It happens to me too. That's what I was telling Joseph 2 weeks ago.
Okay. So you guys want to go out out in left field a little bit here?
Quick question, Joseph. When I'm testing,
Sure.
if I go down the grocery store and I'm testing supplements, do I actually have to be holding that supplement, or can I just be like saying the word in my mind?
There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. One is that you can have it proximal. I would consider that as a manual stim, meaning it's being put into your environment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just like you manually stem a specific receptor like we did with Yolanda, or you'd manually stem a muscle response like the psoas test, or whatever it might be. That's a manual stem. And then we have also the capacity with our intention. And our intention actually is stronger. And our intention is influenced by a lot more things. For example, our subconscious thoughts, which is anywhere between, some people say it's as high as 90% of what's going on in our experiences is not conscious. It's not consciously available. So the answer to your question is yes, it could be either. Now, one of the ways that you want to practice is you can look at a shelf. Is it along this shelf? Is it along this shelf? And then you can start to dial it in that way, just with visual. You don't even have to say the name or anything, because the intelligence of our nervous system is picking up on something different than our cognitive processing. But we're setting the intention. And then once you find the thing, then you can manually test it. Because if that thing is not right for your body, in as far as an element for nutritionally for your physiology, when you bring it in, your nervous system will switch off or go hypertonic. So on one hand, I think it would be really interesting to give you guys an example of right hemisphere, left hemisphere processing. And on the other hand, it may get some of us kind of lost and in the weeds. And so this sharing that I'm providing for you guys is really about you guys. It's not for me to show off what I can do and what I can't do or anything, but I want to give you guys something tangible that is going to have meaning as you're making a progression from hands-on people to how do I start working with people online? What am I looking for? How am I working with it? Hi, Yolanda, welcome. Alexis wants me to show off. That's hilarious.
So Joseph, it takes me back to the question of how can I trust my results if I know that I tend to switch? I mean, I could ask a secondary question like, is this true? But even then I could be switching. So I
Yeah.
can't trust my results.
Right, right. So then we have to have a process to do this. And so, well, let's go on this tangent. I mean, this might be really interesting, and we all might learn something from this. What did Claire say? Super intrigued. Okay, Claire's interested. Okay, so the first thing is, let's raise hands. Who in the room does have capacity to qualify a self-indicator and work with a self-indicator? Okay, great.
I have the capacity, but it's not always accurate.
Well, then you don't have the capacity if it's not always accurate.
Well,
If
maybe
you can't
maybe
qualify
it
it-
is, and I don't trust it.
Ah, well, there we go. Okay, so let's do that. And so, Rhonda, are you okay with being our client today?
Sure.
Great, great. I'm going to keep this on I've got it on speaker view. Hopefully it's recording this way. Welcome, Yolanda. So let's all get our indicator that has capacity to get our indicator. So what is yes, what is no? Okay. Now, for those that were able to join me on Friday, we have another way of doing it where we can do what is yes, what is no. We can go to the muscle spindles in the opponent's pollicis and we can do a compression. Did that temporarily inhibit? Yeah. We can also go to a skin stem where what is yes, what is no. I'm going to do a skin stem and gently pinch the skin at a superficial level, and it temporarily inhibits for about 5 seconds. I got like 2, and then it went back on. So this is a way of temporarily inhibiting. So basically what we're doing, with our indicators, we're looking at, does the indicator have capacity to temporarily inhibit? That's the very first major piece. Because if it doesn't temporarily inhibit, that means our nervous system is hypertonic. And if our nervous system is hypertonic, we're not going to be able to send appropriate information with our intention to our client, and we're not going to be able to receive information from our client. So that's what it has to start with, is that are we in a state of normal parasympathetic response where our indicator has capacity to temporarily inhibit? Okay. So now, Rhonda's going to be our client. So the first thing I'm going to ask Rhonda is, have you had any accidents, Rhonda, like car accidents? Have you had any things
Yes.
like that where you may have had a concussion or have injured your neck?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So does that mean that you have had a concussion?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
I was rear-ended in my car. Is
So
the
you were-
one that's been diagnosed, and I was 30-ish. When I was 10, I fell off a horse, landed on my head, but I don't know if there was one then. I did not go to a doctor then.
Okay. So now we have two possibilities of events. We can actually ask, is this the car accident? Is this the horse accident? What did you, those with an indicator, what did you guys get when you asked that question?
Car.
I got the horse, but
You got the horse, I got the horse as well. And then a few people got the car. So 50-50. Now here's the thing. This is going to sound really pretty far out. When we have traumatic events, they can pair with a past event, meaning that our nervous system has something that happens, we adapt to it in some way, like the horse incident. Our nervous system will reproduce the circumstances. So the familiarity of that event happens again. This is the basis of addiction. This is the basis of adaptation, right? So what is the general universal truth of adaptation? The nervous system will become more efficient at reproducing the same results. Isn't this what happens with our physical training? Right? This is an overall pattern of our nervous system, is that we want to be more efficient at what we do. And if that efficient thing happens to be a maladaptive component, we're going to get better at reproducing that maladaptive component. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of stretching it here a little bit. Okay. So now we have to find out what the relationship here is with Rhonda and Rhonda's ability to process information. Okay. So now there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. One way is we can we can have the client use a benchmark of movement like if I look at Rhonda's posture right now, she's slanted a little bit to the left, right? Right? And so what might that mean? That might mean that she's a little hypertonic in the left lumbar. It might mean that she's trying to elevate with her right shoulder. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use that right and left shoulder. I want to see you lift your left shoulder up to your ear. Okay, and then lift your right shoulder up to your ear. Now, I'm going to have you close your eyes, Rhonda, and imagine that you're at the ocean. Hear the sound of the waves. Smell that very unique ozone and mist of the ocean. Who's checking their indicator? What happened? Inhibited. Did you feel that? Okay. Now, Rhonda, I'm going to have you lift your right shoulder. Good. And your left shoulder. Now, did you guys notice that she flipped? Her left shoulder became kind of blocky, where it was smooth, and her right shoulder became smooth and it was blocky. Okay. Okay, good, Rhonda. So now I want to clear the slate. I just learned that Rhonda has trouble processing right brain feelings and sensations. Right? I gave her an imaginary experience and it switched her. You guys following that? Okay. So now what I'm going to have you take your fingers and you're going to come to this K27, right below that soft spot of your clavicle, and your other hand to your umbilicus, and you're just going to massage back and forth. Now I call this is a general tone down, but I also use this, what I call clearing the slate, or clearing the memory of the last assessment process from being cued in the brain. Because I want something new in there, and I don't want them to stack. You guys follow that? Do you guys know the difference between stacking and testing in the clear? Yeah, I see Yolanda saying yes. Yeah, if I'm saying something that doesn't resonate, if you guys don't say something, I won't know. No. Okay, so now we've cleared that slate. It's like taking the eraser of the blackboard. Now I want to draw something completely else on. Okay, I want to check my indicator. My indicator's good. Rhonda, I'm going to have you close your eyes. And I'm going to have you add 3 plus 7 and multiply that by 5. And what did you come up with?
50.
50? Super solid, yeah? Okay. Now, I'm going to have you think of the color blue. Everybody knows, just went off? Okay, so we've verified now that Rhonda has a very strong ability to process information in her left brain, but her right brain, she's unable to coordinate the right and left combination. Okay, so now we need to start to find out why. So this might get pretty esoteric here. So Rhonda, I'm going to have you take your hands and just gently place them around your head. Think of the color blue. Didn't change it. Okay, now I'm going to have you take your hands and put it on top of your head here like this, so you're on your crown. Think of the color blue. Didn't change it. Okay, now I'm going to have you take and one palm on your forehead, just one palm on your forehead, remove the other hand, good, and think of the color blue, normal. Did you guys get that? Okay, so TL to the forehead is the global indicator for limbic association. Okay, let's clear the slate again. Now we want to find out what the association is. What is normal? I'm not, can we, go ahead and come off mute if you have a question, because I can't read without putting my glasses on and squinting and such. Claire? Could you ask that question, please?
Me?
Oh, was it Alexis that asked?
I'm
the
sorry.
question?
I guess maybe I couldn't see her body as well as you could, but I was looking for what changed or what didn't change. So I couldn't, that's why I asked, what is normal? I don't see anything different.
Oh, I was using my indicator.
Oh, okay. That's what you were using. Okay.
I was using my indicator, self-indicating that from
Okay.
self-indicator.
I was looking for
normalized.
something visual.
Right, because it becomes very cumbersome to keep having the client go back and forth through movement. And if you're stimming hypertonic responses, it could send them into a limbic response. And so when we're working with something sensitive, we've got to be careful about how we are stimming that sensitivity so that we're not overstimulating their system. Because once they're overstimulated, we're out of the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it now.
Okay. So now, Rhonda, I'm going to ask you to do that clearing of the slate again. How are you feeling, by the way?
A little tense.
You're feeling a little tense?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a little hypertonic to continue. So this becomes a thing where I'm gonna need your input here, Rhonda. If you feel safe continuing this, because we're gonna be going into an association that may be uncomfortable. It may unpack something that could be very stimulating for you. And we're in a group setting. Do you feel safe going into that?
I am. I think part of it is that being interrupted with questions in the process kind of makes some of that tension.
Okay, that's fair enough. Right, because
Starting.
so the process is a feeling process, right? Processes are sensing and feeling,
Yes.
which is we already know that that's challenging. And on the other side is Rhonda wants to have an understanding of what's happening so that she can grow from it. And so those may be conflicting in the way that her brain is processing information just in this moment.
May I make a suggestion to you, Rhonda?
Okay.
Do you feel very grounded at all right now?
maybe 50%.
Yeah, that's what I was seeing. And so I was thinking that it might help you a little bit if you like let yourself come down and find your feet. And that might help mitigate some of the tension and the back and forth. Because if you don't feel so rocked between questions and process, and you feel a little more stable, that might help you.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that we can notice is Rhonda is sitting in a more optimal position. Her spine is more upright. She's less slouching less. Yeah. And so that's really
Joseph,
good.
is she wearing a sports watch that might be interfering with the battery? Okay.
I have a hearing aid.
Oh, okay. Would that affect it?
I've never tested for a hearing aid. Interesting. Maybe that's why I'm resistant to getting one. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to recheck our indicator. I'm going to have you put your hand on your forehead in the clear.
Does it matter which hand?
Nope. Okay, what did you guys get? You can remove your hand, please. What'd you guys get?
I was a little bit too late to check, so
You got it locked?
I missed it. I missed it.
Yeah. It was a hypertonic. Hypertonic in the clear. Okay. So now, Rhonda, you're going to put your one hand on your forehead and then 5 fingers in your abdominal or in your umbilicus. Normal. Right? Did you guys get that it went normal? Okay. So this is what we know. Go ahead and remove that, please. We know
I'm still
that
getting that she's hypertonic.
you got that she was hypertonic when she held umbilicus, and
Yeah,
who did anyone else get that Rhonda was hypertonic? The other indicators got that she normalized. Let's try that again. So here's something to consider, Alexis. If you have something in your own sphere of experience that is similar, you may be going hypertonic because of we're stimming it with Rhonda.
you talking about a car accident or a riding accident or something else?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Whatever it might be. You know, we don't know exactly what it is yet. We're not
Okay.
there.
All right.
But we know that there is an event, and we have all had events in our life. And so this becomes the bit about recognizing when our own pot is being stirred by our client. Okay, so Alexis, check your indicator. See if you're normally responsive.
Yeah.
You're-
For myself
Yeah,
or for Rhonda?
No, we're not. No, you have to. We always start with ourselves.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm using this way because my fingers get kind of sweaty and they don't tend to work like that. So
Okay.
I'm doing
If
this.
that works for you now.
Well, for
the-
now.
Right. There's there's a couple of things that happen when you are using two of your hands as an indicator, is that then we don't have the ability to do a mechanical stem.
Okay, so let's see. This is my yes, and that would be my no. And how do I know if it's normal or not?
If you do a muscle spindle compression on the pulse
Oh, okay.
opponents, it
I'll
should
do-
temporarily inhibit,
Yeah.
right? Or if you do a skin stem, it should temporarily inhibit.
It did inhibit.
So then that's normally responsive. So you have a qualified indicator now. So that means that you're able to use your indicator in combination with a direct test, which is what
Okay.
we're going to do with Rhonda. Okay, so this is going to be two phases. The first phase is, Rhonda, I'm going to have you put your hand on your forehead. What's your indicator?
I get yes for indicator.
Does it temporarily inhibit?
Should I use my indicator? Okay. Yes, or the compression, yes. And then I wait a moment, and it goes back to, it inhibits, but then if I wait a moment, it goes back to, this.
Okay.
So here, if I,
Speak for a second here.
it
So
goes,
Alexis, what we're trying to find our indicator when we try to inhibit it, if it's gonna unlock.
right,
With Rhonda holding her forehead, we're having it that it's not unlocking. So we know that it's now hypertonic.
yeah, it did that. That's what I said originally.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So we should be having it that it should stay locked. What we're seeing is that Rhonda is not unlocking with a pinch, with the skin stimulation, right? Or the muscle stimulation. And so then we know that TLing the frontal points, we know that that is not, there's not a proper connection there.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's a proper connection, Yolanda. I would change that language to that it's creating a hypertonic response. And we know that this is the universal TL for an association, a memory, an event. Now, I don't like to use the word emotion, and because emotion is something that comes after an experience, after we've processed it, after we've qualified it, or put it, or quantified it. And so, so that kind of language also can be nocivic for people. But to say, oh, you had an experience, well, we all have experiences, and that in itself is a neutral word. Okay, so now what we want to find out is if there's an experience that's creating a hypertonic response, and then when we go to the main secondary, if that gets better. Now, because we're starting from the place, well, I'm really getting out there. Because we're starting from the place of hypertonic, when we just do the double TL, the nervous system, what normal is yes in the clear, but then it should be able to temporarily inhibit with the skin stem. And if it doesn't, then that's not the right pair. This is all part of in the rules of therapy localization in DNA. And so I know I'm getting out there, but this is what we're going to have to get to so that we can start to look at this right-left brain hemisphere balance, because we want to get Rhonda's to recover the ability to process with her right hemisphere. That's what's going to give her the ability to have a clear indicator. Okay, you guys following? Okay, so now, Ron, I'm going to have you put your head on your hand on your forehead. Good. So I am hypertonic. And now, Rhonda, you're going to take your 5 fingers together and you're going to put it in your umbilicus. Normally responsive. I can stem, and now my indicator is normally responsive. Okay, are you getting that? Next, I'm going to have you remove that TL, both those TLs. Now, what I'm going to have you do, Rhonda, is I'm going to have you cross your legs and then clasp your hands and pull your hands through. Okay, now I'm going to have you think of the color blue. Okay, now I'm going to have you multiply 2 times 7 plus 2. What does that equal?
16.
Good. And now imagine that 16, the letters are green, or the numbers. Good. Now I'm going to have you imagine yourself at the beach. Hear the sounds of the waves lapping on the sand. Take in the scent of that sea air. Maybe you hear seagulls, or you see a ship in the horizon. Is everybody getting that Rhonda is now normally responsive, being able to visualize in her right hemisphere? What are we doing? We're toning down the nervous system. Because it's not an appropriate place to actually vet out the specific event. But what's safe is to tone down. Okay, Ron, I'm going to have you uncross. How are you feeling?
Calmer.
You feel calmer?
Mhm.
Good, good. Okay, so now I'm going to have you imagine that you're looking at an abstract painting. Good. Great. Okay, so now I'm going to have you, what's your preferred way in qualifying an indicator?
Well, I often do this,
Okay,
2 hands.
sure, sure.
Okay.
So now see how it qualifies.
Switched.
It switched? Okay, so now here's the thing. You may be one of those people that your yes is an off and your no is an on. And that's what normal is for you.
But I tried both ways. I started with yes as being strong.
Yeah,
I
okay.
asked twice, and that confirmed it.
Okay.
And then I just tried what's a no, and it went to be strong.
This very well may be the false positive. Hunt DNA people. So what we need to do is we need to look at using a mechanical stem, right? Because you're just using thought and intention. And we want to use mechanical stem so that we can verify between thought and intention. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So So if you're doing this method, then you're going to want to still go to this Aponus pollicis, and you're going to do a muscle stem or a muscle spindle compression on your Aponus pollicis to see if you can temporarily inhibit.
So it switched when I inhibited.
Excuse me?
It switched when after I did the press.
Okay, so then,
So let me ask. So when you inhibit, so what was strong becomes weak, right?
yeah.
And then when you ask the other side of that, so if it was strong as a yes, and then you inhibit and you get a weak yes, if you then ask what's no and you get a strong no, have you switched?
No, because you're mixing metaphors. You're asking the nervous system two different things at once, and it doesn't know which question you're asking.
Okay.
So instead, it's the mechanical stem is the yes or the no. It's not intention. The intention is putting information into the structure. So what that looks like is, intention is what is yes, what is no. Mechanical stem is stemming the nervous system should temporarily inhibit. And so it's not asking what is yes, what is no after you've done the stem. It's like apples and oranges. You made fruit salad.
Okay.
You want to try?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so part of what I try to do, and maybe this is my mistake, is I try to confirm by asking both ways. So I ask what is yes, what is no, and then I go what is no, what is yes.
Yeah, I
Am I
wouldn't
mixing
do that.
myself up?
I wouldn't do that. I would keep it in a reproducible format that you're repeating that process so that you have consistency within the process. Somebody's saying something. Rhiannon.
Manual stem.
Let me come over. Let me look at the chats. Rhiannon just said something.
Basically, just what I meant is like if I have to think of a question, because it's hard for me to keep my brain perfectly still. If I'm doing intention, the question is what is yes, what is no. But then if you're doing the manual stem, it's kind of like what is yes, you stem, what is yes. It should give you a no.
Right, and so that's another thing is that I am trying to say that we don't want to mix intention
I don't know if that helps.
and manual stem together. The manual stem becomes the intention. This is why chiropractors, in AK chiropractors, they do all these hand deals, because the hand deal, I don't know all of them because that's not my wheelhouse. But basically what they're doing is they're using a position of their structure that has an association and an intention, right? And so when they're doing that, they're not thinking what is yes, what is no. They're just looking at the stem and then how the nervous system is responding to that stem. It's still a binary language, but that's a different thing.
Mhm.
So my
Right.
understanding of like muscle testing, the only time I would find that people would be switched in direction was when they would do a sway test, that sometimes their sway forward was no and their sway backward was yes. But usually when I'm using muscle testing, that is always still a lock, unlock, because of course now we're testing more of a mechanical. And so that's what I found when I've muscle tested, that there's not necessarily an intentional switch, but I do find when people sway test that yet there could be a difference in their yes and no. And I do check that when we're doing a sway test, which is their yes first. Before I ask them anything else, I ask them ask your body which direction is yes, because that can be switched. But I find that in muscle testing mechanically that it shouldn't switch so much under intention.
Yeah. Though there are those people that their yes is what is a conventional no, but they know that. Now, I don't happen to be one of those people. It's more rare.
Do you find that that's almost what we would call an umbilical cord switching, that they're the type that push on a door when it says pull? Like they do everything kind of opposite a bit?
It very well may be. I don't know, because I don't know enough of those people to be able to correlate that. But that would not surprise me. You know, they see the world from the other side of the coin.
Well, I happen to do that often.
Yeah, right. And so I think the thing there's a couple of things that we want to do, Rhonda, with you. One is you need to continue doing this neural unwinding for your nervous system as a regular practice. The other thing is that you need to have a format that you use for qualifying your indicator, that you're not going in a circle or going back and forth between formats, that you've got a consistency so that you can find consistency within it. Because I think what's happening is your nervous system becomes confused at what your intention is.
Okay.
That was interesting. Right? And so one of the things that you can start to look at is coming back to this, being able to processing through the right brain through imagination and colors. And when you've got yourself where you can qualify your indicator, you can start self-testing, looking at that capacity, and then there's again the process of vetting out why your nervous system would or would not be able to appropriately respond to those thought processes.
How would I do that?
The process of elimination, right? So just like we used the TL with Yolanda last week to eliminate the possibility of, is it an event? Is it physiological? It brought us to, it had to have been structural then. And we started vetting out what was structural, what was the structural component, what was the relationship between structure and the event when Yolanda had a car accident. And so it's always this process of a funnel to get to the specific. We go from general to specific. And it is a process. And sometimes we can't do it on our own. Sometimes we do need helpers. And that's, that's part of this human experience, is that we need help along the way. Excuse me. How you doing there, Carrie?
I'm here. I've learned a lot about indicator today.
Ah, yeah.
Again.
The indicator work is I consider it as, excuse me, I need to get a little Topo Chico, a little wet the whistle. I started developing indicator work in the mid 90s. My ability to use indicators, and I learned a lot from it. That's when I started combining direct assessment and indirect, where an indicator is indirect. And either one of them can provide the false negatives and the false positives. And so we have to be able to qualify at least one of them. And guess what? We can't qualify direct testing. We can only qualify an indicator. And then we can start to look at the weird things that happens when direct movement will flip to an indicator. I call that the global indicator, where we've stemmed a coping strategy. And the next thing that we do with that nervous system in that stem state is indicating for that coping strategy. And so we might think that we're doing a QL to SOAS relationship, but in all actuality, that SOAS just flipped to an indicator and is indicating for the coping strategy that we just stimulated with that QL. And so Nick's, Nick's one of my mentees, and Dana, and he's shaking, and he's going, yeah. Because once we start to look at this, we can start to vet this out. And once we start to vet this out and recognize this, it actually takes everything that we've learned and it turns it upside down. Because when we're thinking that we're testing movement, when our indicator flips or direct test flips to an indicator, we're now, the nervous system is responding to the coping strategy that just got stimulated. And this becomes the tricky bit, because in our classical ABA kind of testing, where we have a function A that appears to be normally responsive, and then you evaluate function B, and function B is appearing to be inhibited, and we think that, we need to apply stimulus to downregulate function A so that the response of function B can happen. Oftentimes that's actually wrong, because what we're doing is, when we're doing that inhibition on function A, we're downregulating that coping strategy that we stimulated initially. And so we didn't actually change anything in the nervous system other than just a little bit of toggling of these receptor responses. Because what really has to happen is we have to further evaluate what was happening in function A as a coping strategy. And this becomes like this whole other dive into the, it's Alice in Wonderland. It really is. And so in some ways it's easier when we start looking at it from a muscle to muscle perspective. But once we recognize, muscle response is at the very bottom of the hierarchy for how the nervous system is coping with the environment. What muscle response is really good for is it gives us something tangible. Movement is something that's tangible. Just like it's tangible to look at whether or not the nervous system is in a parasympathetic mode or a sympathetic mode. Like, for example, if you try to have a conversation with someone that's upset, are they able to take in new information? Not very well, if at all. But when someone had something upsetting happen and then calms down from it, they go back to that parasympathetic, then you can have a conversation. And it's pretty much the same thing with movement. If we're stimulating a sympathetic response with our movement, the nervous system isn't going to learn a new way to organize. It might learn a new coping strategy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it learned a new way of organizing. And that's what we're ultimately looking at, is this ability for our movement and our nervous system to be congruent and organize it in the most optimal way. Because that's what efficiency is. Boy, how did I get on that tangent? Wow. Well, thank you, Carrie, for that. Dax, did you have something?
I just said that's going down the rabbit hole.
That is down the rabbit
As you
hole.
had promised earlier and we had hoped for. So thank you.
Oh, you guys wanted to go down the rabbit hole? Okay. Yeah, it's like, and that rabbit hole goes really deep because, you start to get to a certain level and you recognize that all of our experiences, this physical body is just a reflection of our experiences. It's got nothing to do with the physical body itself. There's nothing wrong with these bodies. There's nothing wrong with our nervous system. Our nervous systems are brilliant. Our nervous systems are doing the best they can to cope with, adapt to, and learn from this group of unique experiences that we each and every one of us has. And so it's like thinking, somebody comes to you with low back pain. Well, we're all so unique, and we've all had so many different experiences that low back pain can have 7 billion different possibilities of what is causing it. And the relationship of how the breathing apparatus is working, how the core is working, how, this thing that we have, this tangible physical experience in front of us, all that is a benchmark on whether or not the experience is congruent with the body. And if the body's not responding optimally, it's because something in the experience needs to shift. A way that we perceive our past experiences, so that in the present time, we can respond differently. It's like this. We can't change our past experiences. What we can change is how we respond to them in the now moment. Now, I know this is like so far out of what we could do with our clients in an online assessment. However, sometimes, more times than not, our clients actually need a receptive soundboard, an ear. They just need to be seen and felt so that they can make the change that their nervous system already knows how to do. Because that's all that we're doing is if we're doing muscle work or trigger point work or neurolymphatic work, we're just pushing the right button in the nervous system so the nervous system has an opportunity to look through a different filter, a different lens. The interesting thing is this all can be done with thought and intention. And so what that comes back to is that if we provide our client with the right fertile environment so that they can process the events that have happened in their life, their structure, their body's gonna change without us having to even touch it or interact with it in any way. Because that's how brilliant our nervous systems are. And so that's the only way that I can see how to wrap what we just talked about into how this can be relevant in an online assessment. Now, the other side of that coin is there are ethical boundaries that we need to recognize as far as what are we licensed to do with people? So we're licensed to touch. However, we're in a non-touching medium. So it becomes very much of a gray area. Now, we're licensed to touch, but we're not licensed to be a psychotherapist. So then, is there a safe way that we can have our client engage on that memory psychology level of the experiences they've had in their life without us as therapists leading them, where it becomes their process? This becomes a really important piece of, as therapists, our ethical boundaries, is that we're not leading our clients, we're not saying, oh, you had X, Y, Z happen, and that's why you have ABC symptoms. That's very dangerous.
Joseph, it's Dax. I just there's a piece that was shared on Facebook quite a bit ago from a peer of mine that talks about what you can do when it's outside of your scope. I'll see if I can find it. It just might be helpful.
That would be super helpful. Would you put it in the discussions?
Yeah.
I'll
look. I'll have to look for it, but I don't know if I can find it quite yet. But I'll look for it today and I'll send it.
Yeah, it's kind of like we're in this gray area right now.
Oh, for sure.
Right now, the way that I've done online assessment in the past is I'm either working conjunctively with a therapist that's in the room, giving them, oh, let's look at this relationship. Let's try this. Let's look at this coordination pattern. Or I'm working with people that are in the DNA program and giving them, being an assistant in their process, but they're doing the work, right? So maybe Nick, you could say something about that in your own processes that we've gone through in the program.
Do you mean my own shoulder problem, which we worked on, or so when I'm working with a client and I don't know exactly what to do or can't find the right point, Joseph and I talk about it in the mentorship program, and he gives me advice so I can try it out. and discuss it later again with Joseph. So that's how we interact and how you learn again.
Right. So what about, like, we've done a few things that are related to experiences that you've had, and and that relationship of discovering how an experience is related to what's being mirrored by the body.
Like for me, for example, my shoulder was painful at my shoulder blade, but you could have an experience like where my shoulder was subluxated in my glenohumeral joint. So Joseph helped me out with my shoulder, and my colleague, for example, he only looked at my shoulder blade, my rhomboids, for example. But well, we do this concept of testing and self-testing and keep going to the prime driver. And there was actually a relationship with that event of me subluxating my glenohumeral joint. So then Joseph guides me in the process of, okay, touch this, do that. And well, the actual treatment was just like this, very small. But how I feel now is totally different. So, yeah.
I'm going to reframe that a little bit. And it's about a process. We're taking our people through a process so that they have an experience. And it is through that experience that they're able to look at how something in the past is related to their present experience. Like, for example, when Nick dislocated his shoulder. Whenever there's an event, there's actually 3 phases in this event. There's the phase of the circumstances that are happening before the event. Then there's the event itself. And then there is what I call post-event, or how we respond to the event. In any one of these 3 phases, the nervous system can develop an association that is keeping us in that past moment. So that past moment is driving our present experience. For example, if you all read the blog that I just wrote, that John Goldthorpe, working with his surgery, it was pre-surgical, was the association that kept him from fully healing. And so identifying the specifics in the event is super, super important for so many of us. Now, in an online assessment, that's probably not appropriate. You have to have someone that really has tremendous inner resources and has done a lot of work to be able to open up that box and be okay and safe with it. This certainly wouldn't be something I would be doing like with a paid client. Because when there's an exchange of money, there's also an expectation. And it could get real muddy real quick, those waters. You know, one of the things that I've had several people ask me is to do a limbic specific module. So we can start to look at how we can appropriately engage these things. In order to do that, we first have to be very solid in having a conversation, being able to have the foundation of having a conversation with the nervous system. Because if we don't have that as a baseline, we're guessing. And that's a very big problem. Because when there's guessing, that means there's also leading. And we don't want to lead a patient or a client through. We want to be a guide. There's a difference between being a guide and leading. How do I frame this? Being a guide is walking next to someone so that they're having their own unique process, but you're there to provide support for them. Leading them is like you're saying, oh, look here, look there, notice this, notice that. It's when we lead is when we overstimulate the nervous system. And if many of us are highly intuitive, and though there are those times when if we're wrong, and then we're really wrong. Like for example, I've been on both ends of the spectrum of having really potent limbic association intervention treatment kinds of protocols, and having the ones where I've completely blown up, where my life was a mess for 3 months. And so I've experienced both ends of that. And I've also seen both spectrums working with clients. And it's not the 50 clients that you help that make a big difference, it's the one that you hurt. Until you've had that experience of that, it's like you don't know how much to put the brakes on, to let it be a process in their own time. Because as guides, it's also not our responsibility that they do their own work. We're just there for them, so when they're ready, they can do it. And this becomes a pretty big thing. And so there's some, what I like to think of as, ethical considerations, as what we're doing with our clients. And so this is why I just don't get into it in this particular medium. So when I asked Rhonda, are you okay if we continue on? I didn't continue down that path because I already had a sense, oh, this is going to be too much. So let's tone it down. And so instead it's like, oh, I feel calmer and I feel better now. That's good. Because that's toning down the nervous system. That's what's safe. I know this is a lot. Well, Dax asked for the deep end, a little bit of the red pill.
Yeah.
Did anybody ask for the blue pill and didn't get it?
I know for myself, when I work with people and when we're going into a territory that they're not ready for, that usually I'll have lost indicator.
Yeah.
That is a big warning that
Yeah.
you're hitting something that the body's not prepared. You can go through the steps and kind of backtrack and speak with the client to a certain extent, going, what is going on right now? What do you feel, type of thing. And sometimes that just communicating will get you back online. But if you don't have indicator permission, you no longer have permission to work with the body. And that is like ingrained rule type of thing. If the body's locking up, it's no longer permission. Do not go there. You will push someone beyond where they're supposed to go.
Yeah, that's super important. That's the first thing that we go through in DNA and keeping the container safe. And especially because we're starting with learning to have the conversation with the nervous system, with the breathing apparatus, which is our most vulnerable primary structure. And so there are people that it's like, we get through the first two subsystems and they're okay, but then as soon as we get to the diaphragms, nope, not ready, not safe. So you're exactly right. And that's why we're always going back and qualifying our indicator. Because if we're not having a qualified indicator, then we don't have the capacity to know if we're over revving their system. This is all so good. Rhiannon, do you have anything that you would add to that from the population of people that you work with? I think Rhiannon's screen is froze. Oh, no, she's there.
I did miss something you said though, because it just unfroze. So did you ask me a question?
Yeah, but I think our internets are going in and out because the screen froze and it's hard to hear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It's doing that thing.
it's doing the thing. Yeah. So, gee, folks, what do you think? Any other questions? Where would you like to see this go? Would you like to see this go into a coursework where we start to look more at the nervous system response, looking at how we do this with DNA? Or would you like to continue this path of looking at how we're making a transition where we're unable to work one-on-one with our clients, but how can we still have a healthy interaction?
Either or, you know, I'm learning so much here, even today with the indicator. It's kind of putting something tangible on what I'm actually feeling with the client. Like I can say yes or no with them, kind of like what Yolanda said about knowing your limits. And this can really help with that, at least in my practice anyways.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I'll often say that we're just using our muscle testing to look at how our own intuitive process, we want to qualify whether or not that intuitive process is on the right track or not.
That's just it, because a lot of times I even just look at people and they have, like, say, a shoulder problem, and I'm drawn to their hip or their knee, and this is a really great way to qualify that, I guess.
Sure.
You know, like, it's just my intuition. I'm being drawn there for whatever reason. I don't know. So.
Right. And then in their own nervous system, then you need to connect it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, really good. Well, I went a half hour over as usual.
Quiet. Sorry. I unmuted myself and then yelled at my kids at the same time. That was wise. I I was gonna say there is an online resource for muscle testing called Knowlative, and this is done by two guys have put this platform together. Check it out. They also have an online conference coming up. Now, this comes from very much the specialized kinesiology world. But what I was going to say is for you as body workers, is Knowlative is trying to do where they're creating the ability to put your sessions in basically a database so we can start seeing what corrections work for what type of body like problems. So in order for muscle testing to have, say, a double-blind study, it takes a lot of money, right? Whereas Knowlative is trying to build a database based on practitioners putting in the information, and then we can start seeing statistical work. So I would just say check out Knowlative to see if that's something that you're interested in, sort of adding your work as bodywork practitioners to see if it's of any benefit. They'll have all the muscle tests. If you pay for the membership, they'll have many muscle tests in the body, and then the corrections, which is very Touch for Health sort of foundation. But I was just speaking with one of the co-founders over the weekend, and it's a great way to sort of build this bodywork muscle testing. And so I would just encourage you guys to check it out and see if it's of any use to you. So I'll put it in the chat.
Great. So are you familiar with what Dr. Palomar has done with muscle testing and taken, he was the president of the AK Society for many years, and he's a orthopedic surgeon, and he really advanced this idea of a funnel of going very specific to receptor response. And they're just starting to do some studies in the USSR because no one will touch it in the US. There's, I believe his name is Dr. Jepkins or Jenkins. I've got his thesis. He's in Holland, and he's a doctor that has gotten positive manual muscle testing work published. And there's very few published pieces because of, like you were saying, the funding for double-blind tests, it hasn't been done. And so there's a lot of discrediting with what the potential of what manual muscle testing is now, and for good reason, because the differences between examiners, like I've been talking about how we have to be our own client first. If I have a particular kind of coping strategy, when I'm working with someone, I could be stimulating their coping strategy that's similar, and vice versa. And so there's lots of different ways that through our unique biorhythm and this thing that I'm calling limbic resonance is when as nervous systems come together and in synchronicity, unknown variables happen. And it's because of those unknown variables that it doesn't work in the scientific method. Because it's a combination of science and art. It's this left brain, right brain integration, just like science is, I talk to science people and it's like, man, they're just so left-brained. And they've got this is the only process that works. But we know that there's more. There's more, there's a lot more, there's more, there's unknown. Well, you guys, anything else?
So Joseph, you're saying limbic resonance can be contagious?
Can be,
Contagious?
I think it's more than can be. I think that limbic resonance is our natural state of being. I think that if you look at the idea that our brains are processing 9 billion bits of information a second from our environment, yet we're only consciously aware of a few thousand. What do you think's happening with all that other information? We're all communicating. It's just like we're all connected here, even through this medium. Now, we're all having a unique experience with that connection because of the uniqueness of our histories. But at some level, there is something that is congruent.
Joseph, if you have time, because I don't want to take anybody else's time, but I wanted to ask you about the umbilical cord switching, because I have a protocol for it, and I was going to grab it and see if you had heard of anything similar. So,
when you say umbilical cord switching, are you talking about, because this is classically used in AK as for switching.
Yeah, so we basic Touch for Health, we have right left brain switching, up down switching, and front back switching, right? Whereas umbilical cord switching was a course that I had taken in AK Shortcuts by oh shoot, now I'm trying to remember his name. He was one of the like what they called the Dirty Dozen or Dirty Seven or something like that, if you remember. Anyhow, I have the book. I just didn't want to walk away from my computer. Basically, umbilical cord switching, we have the practitioner put their hand on the belly button and then the client their hand on top, and then we check an indicator. If it goes off, we say this is umbilical cord switching. We call this a deep type of switching. This is where someone pushes on the door when it says open. They do the opposite of they tell them. I see this sometimes in kids in gymnastics because I coach gymnastics, is that, I'll put my hands down in front support. They'll stick their feet up on it. And I'm going, that's not even what they're seeing. Like they're doing a total opposite of it. Anyhow, the correction is depending on which way the indicator strengthens, is that we're using the sacrum. So we're pushing, they're laying prone, you're pushing, this way, the sacrum this way, or it's this way. And so it seems to be, I don't know if it has to do with sacrum pump type of switching, but I'm just wondering if you've heard of anything like that.
I haven't, but it sounds like it's affecting the distal ganglia.
Yeah, and so he calls it a deep type of switching, and this is where you'll see people making decisions that, like financial, personal, relational type of decisions that they make kind of like the opposite of what benefits them. So it's not a true type of sabotaging, but at the same time, it's very similar. It's more of an electrical type of, like a brain kind of switch.
Yeah.
That you could explain to someone how to do something and they'll kind of do the opposite of what you told them to.
I'm wondering if this is related to monotasking.
Okay. Yeah, I was just kind of going when you were talking about Rhonda, you know, that, and she said, oh, she goes, I do that all the time. That I was like, I wonder if this is what we would classify as umbilical cord switching. And this is something when I'm working with someone, I check, because to a certain extent, all the corrections that I make in a session, if I haven't checked that or corrected that, to a certain extent, it may hold the benefit for a very short amount of time, and then they'll go back to, they'll switch off again.
Right.
And so, yeah,
Right.
so
And it all comes back to whether or not the nervous system is able to take in information and
yeah,
learn from it.
yeah. And that
Yeah.
was, yeah. So I was just kind of going, it seemed to be from what he was doing was a correction in the sacrum. But you're saying that you're wondering if it's a basal ganglia type of switch.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Because that's going to be affecting the coccyx.
Yes.
And so,
So that basal ganglia would be connected to the cox. Okay, so that would make sense. That's what, you know, sometimes you have it that one person approaches it from here and another person approaches it from this, and then yet at the same time, you're kind of like, okay, well, this is what's kind of going on at the root cause.
yeah.
So that would make sense if you're adjusting the coccyx.
Yeah. So Jocelyn has a technique, she calls it space buttons. And it's a relationship between the coccyx and the occiput,
Okay.
and our ability to maintain presence in both places simultaneously. We're either in one or the other, but can we hold awareness and the space of where our body is in space and time, that we can be in both places at once.
Okay.
Right. And so like I do this with people in meditation, is looking at the different components of our breathing apparatus. Can you maintain sensation of air passing through your nostrils, at the same time the air passing through your lungs, at the same time the air passing through your glottis, at the same time noticing the rise and fall of your abdomen, at the same time noticing the rise and fall of your pelvic floor, and so on. And the more pieces that we're able to hold at once, the more integrated our system becomes.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, I wonder if this is related to monotasking as well, because what happens in monotasking is that we can only hold one thing at a time. And because we're inundated with distractions, that one thing that we hold at a time flips to an indicator and we do the opposite thing. And so, but I don't know. That's just, you know, hypothesis.
Yeah, it would be interesting to find someone who has that and figure out like exactly, right? Because it's not every client that I find, like, but I will check it on everyone that I work with, because if it shows up, it's like a pre-correction before you even start doing corrections. It's like hydration, right? It's like the other type of switches too, right? Anything, it's like qualifying an indicator that I have these pre-checks that I do. Same thing of like, I ask for permission. I ask that if they're going to be safe, right? I'll qualify that with an indicator, because if they're not going to be safe, there's no reason for me to work on them, because I won't be able to have access. So
when did you start to recognize that?
You know, it wasn't, part of it was sometimes talking with other practitioners and, you know, what they used as pre-qualifying questions and stuff like that. So I'll have it that they're taking, I'll ask them, you know, are they, that they're willing to be worked on, right? That they have permission. And not just verbal permission, but body permission, right, from the indicator. Then I'll ask that they're responsible, that they're willing to integrate the work that we do, because if they're not willing, you know, you can have someone work on you and they have, it's kind of interesting. I have a question on my intake question that says, what part is my responsibility and what part is yours? And it's so interesting how people will answer that question. Technically, it's 100% theirs and none of mine. But people that have more difficulty with self-responsibility will usually put an 80-20 or less. They will make it more my job than theirs. And it's just, and because one lady had finally, she goes, isn't this a trick question? I'm like, well, it's not a trick question, but it gives me a very good clue right off the bat on what kind of client I'm going to be working on.
Yeah. You know, there's lots of clients that come to us that on a cognitive level, they want change and they want to have a different experience. But on an unconscious level, there's a payoff. There's something that they're vested in remaining in that state. And that becomes a very difficult thing to work with when they're not willing to take responsibility for their own process. And so that's a really big piece. That's a really big piece. Now, most of us as body workers, we get into body work because we're looking to process our own experiences so that we can have more awareness in our own body, in our own sensations, in our own feelings, in our own thoughts. But our clients are coming to us for a different reason than we got into this profession.
I'll post some of the questions, like the verbal questions that I use. I'll put it in the discussion board so people have access to them.
That'd be really helpful.
Yeah, one of the things that I will make note of it is that you do have to have a pre-qualified indicator before you can ask these questions, right? That, I mean, It goes without saying, but I'll make note of it just in case.
Right, it all starts and ends with a qualified indicator. Because for me, that's the essence of being able to have this conversation with the nervous system. And without that conversational element, it's guesswork. It really is just guesswork. Now, that doesn't mean that we're really good guessers.
Okay, well, thank you. I thank you for this, like 4 weeks of, this was really awesome. Thank you for introducing me to your work. I'm going to have to continue with it because it was kind of interesting. I had found you through Google, just trying Ben Greenfield Fitness, then looking at kinetic change, but then there was also some other fascial work and it was just sort of, and then I was like, oh, he's talking about gait. That makes so much sense because you're on planes, right? Because my gymnastics coaching, I'm always seeing kids. It's amazing nowadays how many kids are so petrified about doing a forward roll. And this has to, I think, do with sometimes the amount of C-section babies that we're starting to see because they're not going through some of their birth reflexes are not being activated. And that brain pathway is not being turned on like it should be. And they have a fear of going upside down. And this is, again, a very limbic response, a very Moro breathing. You can see it. They when I have them on bars and they're supposed to do a forward roll going down off of the, to go off the bar, they're this way and this response. It's and the thing is, as a coach, because I've asked other coaches that they've been seeing the same thing and they're like, yeah, we've never seen kids as often having this. And I said, and every time I ask the parent if that child is a C-section baby, they say that almost 95% of the time it is that they're having difficulty with that upside down rolling forward. And so I have to very much break down the process of looking at your belly button, and they have to get comfortable with that. So it's movement that is actually reintegrating that limbic response. It's
Yeah.
very cool.
Because it's pre-verbal. I mean,
Yes.
it's in vitro.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
They didn't go upside
yeah.
down to get birthed, basically, is what's kind of happening.
Yeah, we go into this in the breathing apparatus, is the spinal wave, and what is a normal wave of the spine. And we can start to break those movements down. And then that can become more efficient when you start looking at how the spine actually waves in movement. Because that's the most efficient transmission of energy. Like if you look at the way that a flag waves in the wind, it's not segmented and it's not angles. It's a smooth wave. It's like watching a snake spine move.
Would this be because that's why the breaststroke is sort of one of the fastest swimming? Like, where they kind of go
Well,
like
yeah,
this?
because it's getting the wave of the spine with the frog kick, and that's why also the butterfly is too.
Okay,
Butterfly
yeah.
and the breast are very related that way, where it's the spinal wave is integrated. It's like I know for like my daughter was really into like mermaids for a while, and like I made her the tail, and I got her the monofin and all that stuff. She had a really hard time swimming monofin at first because it's finding that wave. And now I was a swimmer, and I swam long course. And one of the things that I would like to do, it's illegal now because it's so efficient, is off my dive, I could swim the first 50 meters underwater with just a spinal wave. Yeah. Now they only allow you to have 2 kicks, right? Because it's more efficient underwater because it's the relationship of breaking the surface tension of water creates more, I guess it's resistance. Oh my gosh, this was so fun, everyone. Thank you so much.